Greetings. Today we are going to talk about Frankenstein. I have talked to Mrs. Fleming about your progress with the novel in her class, and she has identified that you guys need some more work in this area. So we are going to focus on Frankenstein for this week's module. We're going to talk plot structure in depth, and then we're briefly going to hit on characterization. We'll talk more about characterization next week. Plot structure, as you will see when you get to your lesson where you'll read and take notes, plot structure is exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. So, in the first part of Frankenstein, where you have Walton on a ship writing letters back and forth, then witnessing a monster on a sled led by dogs, and then finding Victor Frankenstein. This is your exposition. So, what is an exposition and plot structure? It's the opening scenes. It's the opening section of a story which provides important background information necessary to the understanding of that story. It establishes setting. Where are we? What does it look like? And why does it look like this? There's an introduction of the main characters. Who's the story going to be about? The exposition reveals conflicts. What seems to be the problem? So, in the exposition of Frankenstein, we have all of this going on. All right. The scene with Walton on the ship is your exposition. So, the first section is written in epistolary form, um, which means that it's written in letters back and forth from Walton to his sister in the 1700s, 18th century. These letters are important. They document a fictional correspondence between Walton and his sister Margaret. Walton is a failed writer and captain who sets out to explore the North Pole and expands his scientific knowledge in hopes of achieving fame. During the voyage, the crew spots a dog sled driven by a gigantic figure. A few hours later, the crew rescues a nearly frozen and emaciated man named Victor Frankenstein. Frankenstein has been in pursuit of the gigantic man observed by Walton's crew. Frankenstein starts to recover from his exertion. He sees in Walton the same obsession that has destroyed him, and he begins recounting his story. So, really, the section one of Frankenstein begins begins in the what would be considered the contemporary, right? And then we have what's called a flashback when Victor begins telling his story to Walton, right? The main section of the story is when Victor starts recounting the tale of uh, his own obsessions and what happened. After the exposition, you have the rising action. Okay, it asks, what is the conflict? It develops the story's characters, problems, and themes. The conflict is the longest section of plot structure. The building up to tension, which next comes in plot structure, is climax, the tension of the story. So today I want to focus on exposition and rising action because that's what we have going on in section 1 of Frankenstein. We have the exposition, which sets the scene, introduces the characters, introduces the problems, and then we have the rising action when Victor begins his flashback telling Walton of his own story and his own experiences. Characterization, we're just going to hit on briefly. Who are the characters in section 1 of Frankenstein? And why are those characters important? What are those characters representing? What are they symbolizing? So, who is Walton and why is he significant to the story? Who is the giant man? Why is he significant to the story? And this again is drawing inferences. Who is Victor and why is he going to be significant to the story? He's going to be significant to the story because he's going to narrate the flashback, the main bulk of the story, to the audience. So move on to your lesson and take notes, take effective notes. Remember your midterm will be coming up um, when we get back from spring break on the 19th. You may use your notes, but make sure that those notes are thorough. If you have any gaps in your notes or if you've been skipping your notes and just going to your lessons, that's going to be problematic for you on the midterm. You may not print out the lessons and use the printouts. You may not look into the modules and look at the lessons. You may only look at the notes that you have written down in your spiral. So make sure that you've taken good notes, and if you haven't, you've got plenty of time to fill in your gaps. So our midterm will be on the 19th, and it will be in lab. Okay, move on to your lesson now and begin.